Hey everyone! So my family visited me this past weekend, and while it was great to see everyone, the weekend was filled with unease, resentment, and conflict. I never really thought about my past, but recently my dark past emerged in my memory, evidenced by my uncontrollable outbursts with my mom. To provide you with some context, just last year I got really sick when I had a falling out with my mom. When my mom was doing her usual shutting down to protect herself, I was a hot mess emotionally, which created so much unnecessary drama. It was unbelievable. I'm typically very logical and smart, but I could not understand and explain my upheavals and this uncontrollable rage that I had towards my mom. I ultimately believe these emotions were what caused my health issues and led to my hospitalization last year. So let's talk a little bit about the emotional triggers which can cause lupus to flare. I am the youngest of 4 kids. I have 2 older brothers and a fraternal twin sister. As an immigrant from Korea, I came to the States when I was just 10 years old. Just prior to that, though, 4 of us were in Korea, staying at my maternal grandmother's home for about a year. My grandmother was an alcoholic, and the living conditions there weren't nearly as nice when we were living with our parents. We were basically orphaned, and our parents came to the States first to get all the immigration documents in place to bring the 4 of us to the States. It was a necessary evil, but my siblings and I agree that it was a traumatic time for all of us. My father was born as the youngest of 4 kids and was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. My grandfather was a very wealthy man, and when he died, he left my dad as the VP of a very successful construction company. And my uncle was a president of the company, and from what I understand, he gambled all the money away with my grandfather, or when my grandfather died, and my dad knew he needed to flee for a better opportunity here in the United States. So I was a misfit because as a young girl, I was constantly compared to my sister. I was the ugly duckling, and my sister was the ideal, pretty counterpart. As twins, we were always compared that way. I don't think it bothered me much, as I was always full of imagination and curiosity and too busy to be obedient to my mom. While my sister was always quiet, clean, and pretty, and I was the outspoken, disheveled, and spunky one, always getting into trouble. To provide you with some perspective, I grew up in a family where male superiority was a thing. Girls were supposed to be obedient and meek, and I was far from that stereotype. My mom always emphasized how about my sister's beauty, but reminded me that I was a smart one. But being smart was not a trait that was highly regarded at that time. I don't think that bothered me until I was going through puberty. Korean culture emphasizes pride and hierarchy, especially with birth order. So when we were left in Korea, when I was just 8 years old, I remember how lonely and vulnerable we were. My grandmother could not handle my rambunctious nature, and I was always getting into trouble. And it was sad because my mom wasn't there. And to go from well cared for to an alcoholic grandmother who's always yelling at me with no caretaking skills was the hardest thing for a young girl. And this was the trauma I believe was that seeded all of my emotional woes today. So let me talk to you a little bit about the emotions and the way I understand its connection to lupus. I tried so hard to live up to my mom's expectations all my life. So I try to make up for it by getting highly educated. Because education is highly emphasized in my culture, and as a young woman, I didn't have any interest in getting married at all. I wanted to be a successful, independent, career-oriented woman. And because my brothers and sister married early, I was the only one left at home. My parents fought a lot, and whenever I would go home during the weekends from grad school, I would be left to mediate their fights. This was not something a young woman should do, but my mom lived vicariously through me, and she was super proud of what I was becoming. It meant everything to me to make my mom super happy. Her love was something that I sought after, especially because I believed that my sister was her favorite. So, my lupus crisis changed everything. During my last year in doctoral studies, I became really sick. For the first time, I frequented the hospital emergency room and grew progressively sick. I was diagnosed with lupus, and to me, this meant that I was now completely broken. I fell into depression, and I felt so ashamed because of this disease. And I went from a confident and happy young woman to a fearful and depressed lupus patient. I met someone, and for the first time, I was rejected by his parents. They said I had an incurable disease that could take my life away because they had a lot of doctors in their family. And my ex-husband fought for me, and we eventually got married and had 2 kids. I lived my life by default because I felt like I was broken. I lived helpless and tried my best to be the best wife who was meek and obedient, but this didn't last for very long. And because this was not who I was. And I had trouble in my marriage for over 12 years and then finally was divorced. So let me tell you about my lupus healing journey. For the 5 years, finally, I've been working on my mental and emotional health in search for the meaning of who I am. I realized that my lupus had an emotional root. This was the epiphany I had last year when I got sick after my emotional encounter with my mom. I was able to recover from a near-death experience. As you guys know, I wrote about this. The doctors could not explain what had happened. Lupus was certainly regarded as the cause of my illness, but they didn't know what to make of my illness and my sickness, really. I was followed for 6 months post-recovery by an infectious disease doctor, a rheumatologist, and an oncologist. I've never needed medication during this speedy recovery. We found that my lupus ultimately was completely in remission to a level where it is now considered indeterminate as far as the advised testing. I incorporated functional medicine for sure, but I also incorporated mental and emotional work to shift my paradigm, to serve me better, to create a better outcome for myself, because I realized so much of uncovered emotions was hurting me. I've uncovered so much about myself and currently continue to strive towards healing to cultivate self-regard, love, and respect for myself. At the end of the day, this is the human experience, and all I want to do is to share tools with you to not only heal lupus, but to help you finally realize how much power we all have in our lives, especially when it comes to our health. So instead of living at the effect of lupus, how about if we live life on our terms? All it takes is a simple paradigm shift. This is a process I guide you through in my Lupus Health Revolution program. We just recently closed enrollment, and I'm so excited to take this first class through this amazing journey. We'll open enrollment up for this program every so often. So click below to be added to our wait list so you can be informed right when enrollment opens again. But remember, you guys, healing is really an inside job. So thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe to our newsletter at lupusrebel.com, our YouTube channel, Dr. Connie Jian, and our podcast, Health Made Easy, on iTunes. And I would so love it and be so grateful if you can leave us a review on iTunes. Also, follow us on social media, including Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest at Lupus Rebel. See you guys next time.